Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this masterclass on mentoring and networking, the importance of relationships in career growth. My name is Raksha Dharanani and I'm the Research and Content Manager at HOSCO. Today's masterclass will help you explore how relationships can play a crucial role in your hospitality career. So I'm excited that you're all here from all over the world. I'll just give the attendees a few minutes to sign in and, so we can all be prepared, and then we'll start. Okay, let's get started. So thank you so much for joining us from all over the world today. We're thrilled that you're here. HOSCO is a professional network specially designed for the hospitality industry. HOSCO was born in 2011 to empower the industry by uniting all of the professionals, educational centers, and employers in one global network. On HOSCO, you can connect, find, or provide job opportunities, career advice, and access courses to upskill and reskill. We currently have more than 1.6 million hospitality students and professionals. We have 400 plus hospitality schools and more than 1,000 world-class companies around the globe. So today's masterclass on networking and building relationships will help you understand how mentoring and networking contribute to career growth, how to explore the science behind building strong relationships, and which strategies can help you approach mentoring and networking more intentionally. The experts joining us this evening have extensive experience in the field of networking, relationship building, and mentoring. So allow me to introduce them. We firstly have Janet Shaner, a lecturer at EHL Graduate School. Janet specializes in organizational design and talent management systems. She has over 20 years of experience in the management education industry, and she has contributed to the design and implementation of EHL's mentoring program and has facilitated networking workshops both within and outside of EHL. The cool part is she is also the author of Networking, Coffee, Not Cocktails, a book that bridges science with real-world practice, helping executives achieve better results. So Janet, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Raksha. You've stolen a bit of my thunder. Why am I here today? I'm interested in mentoring. I've done a lot of research on networking. And for me, I think the most interesting thing that I hope someone will take away today, we think often that building relationships is a very strategic and transactional thing. But in fact, if you look at the science, if you look at what I have learned over the course of my professional career, no, it's really about building relationships. It's about something for the long term. So I hope that our audience today will maybe have a different idea, a different perspective, and see how we can think about relationships really in a constructive way for our career growth.
Thank you for that addition, Janet. And next we have Jose Soriano, a global hospitality senior executive. Jose is a results-driven, management-driven executive with over 28 years of experience in luxury hotels, branded residential, and mixed-use real estate development. He had a distinguished career at Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, where he served as SVP of Residential Operations until August 2023. And he is also dedicated to mentoring and developing talent within the global hospitality industry. Jose, please, could you tell us some more about yourself?
Well, good afternoon. Thanks, Raksha, for inviting me, for joining this great topic. I have a focus, and really I've always been passionate about mentoring and contributing to leaders as they grow within their careers. And throughout my life, I've been fortunate enough to have some incredible mentors and people have helped sponsor my career, and I'm really very focused on contributing and making a difference. I'm dedicated to really growing and mentoring leaders in the global hospitality business. And this is an incredible opportunity to share some of our experiences of what I've learned and what Janet's learned over the years. So very excited to be here. And I think many people have joined this webinar because obviously they have a passion and an interest in collaboration and the power of being in communities that bring people together. So it's great to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jose. And thank you, Janet. So I hope you're excited because I definitely am. And before we get started with the webinar, the content that the two experts will present to us, I just wanted to inform you that if you have Any questions, please pop them in the Q&A for us, not in the chat, but the Q&A, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. And if you are worried about not being able to watch, or you have signed up and you need to leave midway, don't worry, you'll get the recording at the beginning of next week. So nothing to worry about, just enjoy, and please definitely share your questions with us. And now I'll leave the thing to you, Janet.
Great, thanks a lot. We okay? You can see the screen?
Yes, all good.
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. So for our studio audience, just to let you know, we've set this up. We have a presentation. I'll say some things, I would say more from a scientific approach. Jose's gonna complement from a practical approach. And ideally together, we'll share with you our experiences, maybe lay some foundation for some good questions to follow. So to kick us off, the point of the presentation, as Roxa introduced, mentoring and networking, the importance of relationships in career growth. And we'd like to cover 3 key areas, thinking about the importance of relationships in our professional development, the science behind how do we build relationships, and thinking about that a bit more, and then the combination of those 2 things, how can we use them to be more intentional in how we build our professional relationships, especially since one of the reasons is to help our career growth. So 3 chapters that we'd like to cover today. The first, if we think about our professional development, one of the very famous models in learning and development is called the 70-20-10 approach from the Center for Creative Leadership. We see that 70% of our professional development, of our learning, comes from what are called challenge assignments. Getting into an assignment that stretches us, that takes us out of our comfort zone. 20% of our professional development comes from developmental relationships. This can be mentors, sponsors, coaches, trainers. We'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. And 10% of our learning development comes from coursework and training. And what's really interesting about this from a relationship point of view, not only does it represent 20% of our professional development, but we see that it's really the bridge between what we learn in coursework, what we learn in training programs, and how we apply that in our challenge assignments. So these developmental relationships really can help us not only in our development, but make this translation, this transition between what we might learn in theory and how we might apply that in practice.
So I think, Janet, the power of this model is obviously 70% comes from challenge assignments, but getting through those challenge assignments really helps, the help of relationships gets you through those. And I think developing relationships works in unison with the challenged assignments. We obviously positive mentorship and positive networking really helps you to evolve and grow. And our development really takes place in challenging assignments, but getting the feedback through the relationship feedback is very, very critical as we evolve as professionals.
Yeah, great. And so when we think about these developmental relationships, they can be categorized into 4 different areas: mentorship, sponsorship, coaches, and trainers. And let's see what we mean by each of those. So for example, mentors. We identify somebody as a mentor who's a trusted counselor providing guidance and support. So somebody who's a sounding board for us, maybe sharing with us their experiences, helping us think through maybe some challenges that we have. So really a mentor, somebody focused on this idea of guidance and support.
Sponsorship, very, very critical. Throughout our careers, having a sponsor really helps us become more visible in an organization. A mentor helps guide us, but having that importance of a sponsor will really help you become more visible and help you hear about opportunities to grow and be promoted. From a sponsorship perspective, performance and relationships work hand in hand, but ultimately it's all about credibility and being able to do the job. If the sponsor has visibility of your competencies and they have a seat at the table, they can help grow your career and help being your advocate as you are becoming more visible within the organization. So it's a very important part of growing your career and evolving and having more visibility within the organization. And ultimately, if they have a seat at the table, they understand your competencies and they have a strong relationship with you, and there's a credibility, they can actually be your voice with senior leadership as your career evolves.
Good. Another important element could be a coach. And here a coach often is somebody who's there to support you, maybe to guide you, to improve your own behavior, perhaps in managing a team, to help you address specific problems, to help you deal with specific performance issues, either of yourself or with your team. But a coach, also somebody really important in your development, but maybe targeted at specific issues that you're facing.
And as you grow your career, obviously growing your competencies and skills and knowledge is a critical part of your evolution as a professional. Your mentor can really help coach you and put you in the right direction regarding training practices, things you want to focus on, give you very valuable feedback. Where are you going the right direction? What are the areas? What are the blind spots? So the mentorship and sponsorship working hand in hand, but as the mentor will coach you, providing some practical knowledge on how you can grow your competencies and be more rounded as a leader and more effective in your role for future opportunities.
And just to reinforce the idea of the importance of a mentor, of a sponsor. So this is a quote that somebody helped me from my book. But here Peggy said, for many years, I thought that if I did a great job at work, people would notice my skills and I would get promoted. Then I realized that doing a great job is not always enough. You need to have people above your level recommending you for a promotion, a new project, etc. So it signals the importance of these developmental relationships in our career growth.
So I think competency will get you part of the way, but the relationship will allow you to understand where you need to focus on, and as we discussed in the previous slide, how you can evolve as a professional and how you can grow. So obviously competency is critical, but if you have a sponsor who has more visibility of your skill set, then they can be more of an advocate and ultimately help you. So it's a very critical part of competency building is very important. But what builds upon that is having a very strong network relationship and somebody that can give you a guidance and direction on how you can evolve and grow as a leader.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about professional development, and we've said that relationships are important in professional development. Let's understand a bit the science. How do we form relationships? Who do we form relationships with? And how do we form relationships? So for example, who do we form relationships with? Well, we tend to form relationships with people who are similar to us. Either they look like us, we come from a similar culture, we have similar views, we have similar backgrounds. That's one. The second type, people who are located close to us, our neighbors, people who share an office space with us, people somehow whom we interact with physically in a physical location frequently. And finally, people with whom we share intense activities. So we've been on sports teams together. We've been on training courses together. We've been together through some kind of intense experience. And so because we have similarity or proximity, or we feel close, these are the foundations that we need that help us facilitate building relationships.
And I think, sharing common interest is very critical in building a relationship. Forming a community with those that you trust and have a connection with, both professionally and personally. And then sharing like-minded passions and what's really your purpose professionally and personally. And I think, when you look at these, you build relationships, how the chemistry forms. Is there compatibility? Culturally, how do you adapt? And do you feel that you're fitting in with the people who you have this close relationship with? And this connection and like-mindedness is really critical to build trust in those relationships, so you share common interest and continue to grow and evolve as leader.
Great. Another thing we should be aware as we build relationships with people, it might be different sorts of relationships play a role in our professional development, maybe for different times or for different purposes. So across the relationships that we've developed, we might need sometimes for advice or influence. Thinking about the idea of a sponsor or a mentor, we need somebody above us who can share their experience, who can perhaps make a referral for us. Some others we might need for communication. This might be the idea of the grapevine, understanding kind of what's happening in an organization and sharing new information. The third might be we also need people, and this probably tends to be especially people who are like us, for support or for friendship. And so we should be aware that our relationships span all of these different sorts of activities, and we might need to activate different parts of our relationships depending on what are our needs in our current professional development situation.
And I think, recognizing the positive impact of networks and understanding, that you need to sort of get more move from a transactional perspective to a transformational approach. And that means it's not a static conversation. It's a two-way street. It's about evolving, getting different thoughts, diversity of thought, getting different ideas. It's an organic process. It's an iterative process. And it's about being there for each other in your network and drawing upon different styles of leadership, different styles of experience, and building your own secret sauce as you take from your network, give to your network, and evolve in your leadership style and how you continue to evolve over time. And this takes time. It's not, it takes many years to form networks and to evolve trust and to have very open conversations with those you trust.
Good. So that's a perfect segue, Jose, into our next point of discussion. Adam Grant has written a book. It's called Give and Take. And personally, I find it super interesting thinking about, our stereotypical assumption of a networker is a taker. There's somebody who's always asking, give me your business cards. I'm going to follow up. You're going to help me. I'm never going to help you. But in fact, Adam did this really interesting research. And what he found was, in fact, no, the most effective networkers, the most effective people at building relationships are what he called givers and givers with boundaries. People who are willing to help, they're willing to give you ideas, they're willing to make an introduction, but with limits. They'll make an introduction, but you have to do the follow-up. So the most effective people at building relationships have this spirit of giving, have this spirit of being willing to help other people.
And givers come from really a position that success is about contribution. Don't expect anything. When Adam did a lot of his research, he realized that givers as a whole, as a group, were very, very effective and had very, very successful careers. Givers come from a position of giving, influencing, and contributing, where takers tend to sort of want to do something and from a perspective of what's in it for me, and a matcher sort of looks at it from how's somebody going to repay me. And I think one of the critical parts for the giver is really setting boundaries, and that really means asking clearly, why, when, and for whom then someone within their network is wanting to receive information and introductions. But givers are such a critical part for success. They help and they really make organizations very successful. So a lot of Adam's research was to look at Fortune 500 companies and realized that pretty quickly that those successful organizations had givers in very senior roles, came from a position of contribution, responsibility, commitment, and authenticity to really guide different members of the organization and grow and help them succeed. And a very important part of the network. So if you're looking to build your network, you should come from a position of giving and also maybe draw yourself to other givers that can help contribute to your success and will be very, very helpful as you evolve your careers.
Good. And the final thing, and this is something personally I found really interesting. The people best at building relationships are what are described as energizers. And these energizers are 4 times more likely to build effective relationships. So what does this mean to be an energizer? It means first, I approach my relationships of building foundations of trust. I want to create real connection. I want to build reciprocity. I'm willing to give. I'm willing to give something. And I follow through on what I promise. If I say I'll make an introduction to you, then I follow through and do what I promise. So I build trust in the way I approach my relationships. And secondly, it's described as do in the moment. I'm willing to be open to engage in possibilities. I listen. I help others contribute in meetings. I'm flexible if we have to adapt in some way to reschedule a meeting or to adapt the way we work together. So these things, let's say I'm teaching courses in organizational behavior. These are what we would teach in terms of good practice. But in my own experience, I've been really surprised at how often people don't do these things. This idea, this approach of approaching our relationships with energy, with trust, with possibility, seems like the simplest idea in the world, and we see that it really pays benefits, yet often enough people don't do this. So some inspiration for you. How could you think about something under your control? How could you approach your relationships to be an energizer?
And I think something to reflect on, as Janet outlines, energizers are 4 times more likely to be more effective in relationships. So it's really about how do they build trust, and it's coming to the relationship from a perspective of being very positive, how much you can give, but ultimately coming with a high degree of empathy for each other, for yourself, for those you come in contact with, and also those within your network. Empathy within leadership can really help you be very responsive and at the same time, reflect on your own opportunities for growth and look and identify the things that you want to grow and the things that are your blind spots. And ultimately, energizers come from a high degree of commitment, responsibility, respect, and authenticity with the people they work with to really have open conversations. And they start to identify their own capabilities and what they need to work on. And as they start to build more relationships, work with those in their network to fill the gaps, along with their mentor, identify learning opportunities to build their competencies, and think about how they can identify sponsors within the organization who can help their visibility as you grow your careers and as people grow their careers within an organization. So as those senior leaders have a seat at the table, they can be your advocate, they can represent your interests and be your voice at the table as organizations start to identify top talent. So the energizers definitely have a positive impact. Think about yourself, reflect. How can you become more of an energizer? How can you learn, give, and come from a position of not being too judgmental and looking at the glass being half full and being very positive on how you can build those foundational elements of trust.
Great. So we come now to our 3rd chapter. We know relationships are important. We know now how how do we build relationships? Kind of what are the scientific foundations? So what should we do with this? And we would encourage the idea of being intentional. So here's another quote from Mika. She says, I've been fortunate in my career to work with both men and women who have mentored me and helped me grow. One of my big takeaways is that you have to be intentional about building professional relationships and to invest time in staying in touch.
So once again, defining goals, be very, very focused on, what's your goal? What's your wish? How you can evolve. Ultimately, analyzing your network. Do you have the right people giving you advice and support? Are you complementing your skills? Are you evolving areas of your professional competencies, your DNA? And ultimately, what are some of the measures and the outcomes you think you want to achieve? And that will help you grow.
Yeah, so if the idea is to be intentional, what are some things that we've learned today and some concrete actions that you can take in this idea of being intentional? Well, first, if we remember that we get to know people through intense activities or through spending time with them, you can identify, well, what kind of shared projects could I be involved with? Could I join a board where I have the opportunity to work directly with other people over an extended period of time? Could I participate in volunteer activities where we have the opportunity to work side by side and get to know each other better? If your organization is launching a new initiative, can you volunteer to be part of a new cross-functional team where you get to know people from different parts of your organization? You're working together on this project and you help to build a relationship. Or finally, can you be part of a new leadership development program your company is launching, or join some kind of training programs? Again, the proximity of being together, the intensity of this helps you to build relationships, and these relationships then help longer term in your professional development. Another thing you could do, well, what we know is when we get to know people in different contexts, it helps us deepen our relationships. So here's where you can have coffee with people. If you see somebody in a different department that you'd like to get to know better, can you invite them for coffee, or do you want to meet for lunch? So you get to know them outside of purely your work interactions. You might do the same at social events. When you travel together for work, it gives you an opportunity to see people in a different context, to get to know them better. Or you might somehow share outside activities. You might be in the same running club. You might interchange with people in school functions. I think the point here, anytime I can get to know people on multiple levels, professional and personal, for example, it helps me deepen my relationship and get to know them better. Finally, you might ask, well, how could I find a mentor? Who might be willing to mentor me? Who might be willing to sponsor me? Can you identify some people who might be part of your board, let's say, for developmental relationships? You might ask them for help. And this asking for help, make it easy for them to do. But it's okay to ask for help, to ask for referrals from other people. And finally, think about, especially with these mentors and sponsors or coaches, be sure you're building trust. Be sure anything that you're asking for help is coming from the spirit of trust. In return, you're giving help to other people. But be sure any approach is coming from this spirit of trust.
Absolutely, very important. And by being intentional and strategic, it's going from transactional to being transformational. And I think it's about thinking of yourself as a brand. Right? We all gravitate to brands we love. So what's your personal brand? Is how do you evolve yourself as a leader And how do you increase your visibility within the organization? How do you focus with your mentor and sponsors to really define your professional goals and maybe form a professional board of advisors, people you trust within that inner circle that can help guide your career as you evolve. And being intentional and strategic is really having a plan, right? So that means defining your objectives. And those objectives can be, firstly, know yourself. What are your goals? What are your values? Do you have people within your network that share the same purpose and values that really can resonate with your own personal values and your mission? And ultimately, as you evolve your personal brand, strengthen areas that you want to develop, and identifying priorities as you start to evolve and as you become more intentional and strategic and become much more transformational. Analyze your network. Is your network where you think it is? Chart out where you are personally and socially and professionally, and see where the gaps are. And maybe there's some communities you want to be part of. And then as you design your future network, think about in the coming years who you think can really add value to your career and help guide you. And those actions really are all about being intentional. And these relationships take time, so it's not going to happen overnight. It's building yourself as a leader and evolving yourself, and ultimately start to track your performance and see as you evolve your career and as you become more strategic and more intentional, you can start to control your own personal brand and identify how you want to evolve yourself professionally, personally, in your career, and have a lot more fun with it, experiment with it, and start to become much more curious. And you'll find you get a lot of enjoyment and find a lot more passion in evolving yourself through the use of your networks and your mentors.
Good. So in summary, we've said today, developmental relationships are important. Mentors, sponsors, coaches, they really make a difference in your career growth. We've discussed a bit the science of how we build relationships, and ideally encouraged you to think about how can you do this in an energizing way, in a giving way. And knowing these two things, we've encouraged you to be intentional, to think about how you can proactively contribute to your career development through relationships. And one thing I think especially important, thinking about, if somebody's going to help you out, you always want to say thank you. Thank you is also some words that aren't used often enough, so never forget to say thank you. I think we'll say thank you for your time, and then I'll stop screen sharing and we can turn it over for questions.
And thank you so much. Thanks, Janet. And I think if you've turned up for this webinar, that's the first step, right? You're being more intentional about being transformational in your networks and how you want to evolve your career and start to evolve as a leader. I think the power of communities and bringing people together and connecting is really going to remove barriers, and surround yourself with like-minded people is going to help you evolve your career and evolve as professionals. So today is sort of the first step. And as you start to think about your career, think about where you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and what are some of the areas you think you can adjust or correct or course correct as you evolve your professional life, your personal life, and how you can show up within your organization and have fun with it and start to evolve yourself professionally and personally, and really unlock the potential that you have for future years to come.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Janet and Jose. That was really enjoyable, and I learned a great deal from both of you. We have a bunch of questions lined up, so I will start off with those. But I particularly liked the part where you spoke about trust and building that trust to, form a deep relationship and to be able to ask for something or give something in return. What do you think builds great trust? Because I know you spoke a lot about it, but how do you demonstrate trust, and how do you make someone understand that you're coming from a good place and not from I want and what can you give me?
Well, I think first of all, we realize trust is built over time. So it's in what actions do I take Do I deliver on my promises? Do I do something I can feel? I think a piece of it is your actions. Do I do what I say I'm going to do? Do I give evidence that I really have your best interests in mind? And the other is also just from a feeling. There's like the research says, you ask a question, how close do I feel to somebody? And so there's this feeling, do I believe this person? Do I feel that this person is going to do what they say? Do I feel that this person has my best interests in mind? A piece of that is the actions that I do, and a piece of that is the connections that we feel. Jose, you're more expert in this in terms of the reality.
No,
what do you
I'll
think?
take your lead. You know, I think trust is, you know, it's the emotional capital of any relationship. You know, I think it's firstly investing time. It's a bit like friendship. You know, the first mentors and sponsors that I've had in my career, first, you have to have the chemistry. There's a friendship, and over time, you build trust, and you start to, first you have to be, you enjoy the time with those people. You have to get the most out of those people. The mentors that I have, or the mentees I've had, is I've learned as much from mentees as I have from my mentors. I think it's about coming from a position of giving, but I think trust comes over time. It takes commitment, authenticity, coming from a position of contribution. How much can you give to that relationship? How much responsibility do you take for your actions in that relationship? The authenticity and the commitment are very, very important as you start to evolve. And it creates this connection and the chemistry that you can really start to really get into some very, 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 very open and helpful conversations. And some of these relationships take many decades. You know, I've had mentors for decades, and it's not about what you want to take from the relationship. It's coming into that relationship and giving with no expectations of taking anything away. And I think it's all about learning, evolving, and rounding yourself as a leader. And trust is where the most open and authentic conversations come. And if you have a trusting relationship, then you commit to one another in the most elegant and honest way possible.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. So I'll start with the questions that we have from the audience. First one is, what is the best way to develop a sponsor if you're trying to pivot your career into the hospitality industry? I have a plethora of experience and leadership exposure, but I am new to this space and it's been an uphill journey.
Yeah, I'll take this one, Janet, first, and then I'll get you to weigh in. But I think sponsorship is one of these things is very, very critical. I think a sponsor can be a mentor, but I think sponsors can also not be a mentor as well. It's someone within the organization that can help be your advocate and be your spokesperson. I think sponsorship is sort of driven on two essential pillars. One is competence, that you show that your sponsor, your capabilities and how they can speak to your knowledge. I think your sponsor needs to see you in the workplace and understand what you do. Otherwise, it's difficult for a sponsor to be your advocate if they don't have a credibility and knowledge of your skill set. And then the other side is the relationship. So you have the relationship side of it and the performance-based competency side of it. So my advice is, if you're wanting to nurture a sponsorship relationship with somebody within the organization, they need to understand what your strengths are. They need to identify, you need to show and be very transparent on what are the blind sides. I think they have to see what you do in the organization. Otherwise, it's difficult for a sponsor to represent your case to senior management. If a leader is not going to be your sponsor without a high degree of credibility, knowing that you can perform or you can be promoted into a job. So I think it's about showing your sponsor your competencies, creating a relationship over time that's built on trust, that you can show what you're capable of. And then the sponsor has a high degree of confidence that they can be your advocate at the developmental table when people are reviewing opportunities for promotion.
I might add, if I understood also, it's somebody who wants to get into the industry. So
Yes.
you might think, okay, I don't know, I think I don't know anybody in the industry, but that might not be quite true. Think about who might I know. I mean, you can even, LinkedIn is good for this. Do some kind of search. Who might I know in the industry? That I know through alumni at the organization, at the school where I went to, that I know through my running club, that I know through some way, they know me on a personal level. And then could I ask them, could I have 20 minutes with you and you just share with me your advice about this industry? So I ask for advice. People are often willing to share their experiences. And so it becomes a little bit of a snowball effect. I build on trust that I've established in other ways. And sort of little by little, I build on that trust to get some introductions, to learn more about the industry, to build my credibility slowly, slowly, and through the referrals or trust that I've built up previously.
And I think totally agree with Janet. And I think the degrees of separation, especially with LinkedIn, are a lot more reduced. You know, before LinkedIn and other social media, you know, the degrees of separation were very, very vast. But now, you know, if you go to a school, you ask to speak to a career advisor, they can put you in touch with students even if a student takes you on a tour. If you go to EHL, I remember going for a tour, those students are always happy to help and contribute. I think the first step is to ask, right? As Janet has said, is ask, and how can I get into the industry? And if you start to look, you know, you get a couple of introductions, you'll find the degrees of separation are very reduced, and how quickly that network can grow.
Okay, thank you to both for that answer. I have another question. Do you have any advice for introverts? I am terrible at approaching others for advice and help, or even just having small talk. I do, however, enjoy giving and supporting peers and colleagues. And secondly, how to maintain relationships when you find it challenging to keep in touch?
So I started laughing. Jose, you can start, but I started laughing because we both discussed we're introverts. So
okay.
It's perfectly fine if you're an introvert, but Jose, you comment first.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm an introvert, Janet's an introvert. Now, by the way, it's not a social skill. It's just where you get your energy, right? There's a lot of books written about being introverts, and there's a lot of very famous people, public figures who are introverts. You know, I think you've got to be a bit more strategic, right? It's a bit like, you know, when I remember going to my first big event, 250 people, 300, 400 people in a room, you look at the room and it's very daunting. It's like an ocean of people. You need to find those little islands in that ocean that you can grasp onto. And sometimes networking is also really identifying, you know, a group of people or rekindling connections with people. And being strategic, having questions, you know, can be exhausting, but you just have to be a very, very strategic-minded person going to events. And there's this sort of negativity to networking, and Janet and I were talking about it. You know, it's not about schmoozing, it's not about small talk, it's about being thoughtful, maybe going to events, identifying people on a guest list or connecting with people, friends that are attending the event, and you can just grow a broader circle. But when you're in some of these big events, no more than, you know, 2 or 3 people tend to talk at the same time. So it's not talking to a massive audience, but for sure, it's something as an introvert that I know when I go to meetings, I just anticipate and think through and look to people that I can gravitate to, and have fun. It's a bit of a, you know, have fun with it. It's a bit of a game that you go in and say, you know, who are some people I know in the room, and it won't be as awkward.
Yeah, what I would want to reinforce, if you see how we build relationships, for me, if you never went to a cocktail party, if you never went to these big events that you hate, this is perfectly fine. Because we build relationships with our neighbors, with people who are like us, with people that we're doing projects with. Get involved in those projects. And introverts are often anyway better at things like this. If you remember Energizers, you want to listen, you want to be creative, you want to build trust. Introverts are often better listeners. So sometimes I think introverts might have an advantage in building these relationships. Be aware of that. do it in a way that works for you. But remember, it's about building the longer term relationship, not the short term small talk.
Thank you. And there we have a question. How does one get a sponsor to help them to develop, to do better at their studies or to choose the right studies?
I think a sponsor can, I think a sponsor, I think you need to focus more on a mentorship relationship and a coaching relationship versus a sponsor. I think a sponsor can present you within an organization, increase your visibility. I think your mentor, coach can identify your blind spots, and then you can have some very authentic conversations on the areas that you think you're struggling with. And then they can help you put together a training plan. I think it's a bit more tactical. And then eventually find the gaps that you can start to feel more comfortable in your studies and where you think the gaps exist. Some people are great at maths, some people are not great at maths. So it's about identifying areas to be coached on and work with your coach and your mentor. And then once you've identified those, I think your sponsor can identify you in the workplace to position you within the organization.
Okay, thank you. And is mentoring only for managers, leadership level, or is it for everyone? Can everyone be a mentor?
There's a current concept now called mentoring and reverse mentoring, which the idea is mentor somebody more senior, reverse mentoring somebody more junior. But frankly, sometimes the more junior, especially how do I use social media to attract young talent? Personally, I have no idea. So this idea, if I could be partnered with somebody more junior to help me, but I think that's a long answer to say mentoring can go both ways.
Okay. And what is there to do if some people don't want to build a relationship with us, even though we are intentional? And for example, what can you do if people you have approached for sponsorship likewise refuse to help?
Find somebody else.
Move on. And it's a bit like friendship, right? If I walk down the street and would you be my friend, I think it's about chemistry, compatibility, and commitment to one another. And not everybody is made to have a connection with somebody, and that's fine. That's okay. I think to build trust and to build a relationship, you've got to find that chemistry. And if that person doesn't want to really actively create that type of relationship, then it's you can have a more of a high level connection with them, but don't get into sort of the detail that's really going to be the best use of your time and their time, right?
Okay. We have a thank you for your time. How would you recommend finding balance between authenticity and strategy? Sales, although not directly, can be slightly stigmatized. So how do you stay authentic and warm in that? And how do you keep in touch without coming across as seeking opportunities all the time?
Jose, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. I think authenticity really is a little bit more of a journey, right? I think the levels of, and I think we're talking about if you're in the sales business, you're selling a product, but I think the most powerful salespeople are selling something that they really believe in the product authentically and stand by the product. I think authenticity and sales stand hand in hand. I think authenticity and commitment to your leadership style is something that you build over time with confidence, and you can evolve. I think when you start out your career, some people have this perception that I have to act a certain way, and because of maybe our insecurities, we try to be someone we're not. But over time, if we start to build our competencies and we start to have some relationships with people that we can, let them look under the hood and see who we really are, then we can be more authentic. But I think very, very successful leaders, if you look at senior leaders or world leaders, they're very authentic because they have nothing to hide, and they want to come and be the best version of themselves. But it takes time to be authentic, but you can be authentic immediately as well. You can just say, well, this is who I am, and this is what I believe in, and these are the foundational elements of my style. This is what I think is the areas that I think I believe I have purpose behind, and I think I really what makes me who I am.
Okay, thank you for that. And but isn't trust a two-way street? Someone is asking when it comes down to nurturing a relationship in either B2B relationship or within a company. Is it a two-way street? Or is it, from what I understand, more psychological?
I think any ideal relationship is two-way. I mean, that's really what makes it a relationship, kind of it goes both ways, this idea of reciprocity. It might be that you trust me, but for whatever reason, I don't trust you. It could be the case, but I think I think the ideal relationships are we trust each other going both ways.
Okay. And are there
And
any...
I think trust, sorry if I can weigh in, I think trust is very, very delicate. You know, there's this quote, trust is like a vase. Once it's broken, it's hard to stick it back together. You have to go into this trusting relationship. It's a very precious environment to be in, and you have to take time, you have to be honest, and you have to be responsible and committed to that relationship, and be authentic with one another, and ultimately you can start to guide a very, very long-term relationship, but it takes time for sure.
Okay. And what are some good sources to get useful information on mentoring and networking in the hospitality industry? What could you recommend for people who want to read more about this?
Janet's book is a first good place to go. No.
Okay.
I think in the hospitality industry, if you're working in the hospitality industry, then it's looking at your leaders and look at those people within the organization you show up to work every day with. And, you know, I think the first step with any of this is really reaching out and having really open conversations and seeking advice. You know, if you're working in any organization, you're getting a performance review, you have your direct boss, that's an opportunity to have that conversation with your boss and say, how am I going? Where am I going? And then there are other people within the organization, and you'll find that over time, you form chemistry with different people. And, you know, there are people that you hang out with, friendships turn into mentorships, mentorships turn into sponsors. It's not transactional, it's transformational. It just takes time as you evolve as a person throughout your career in the workplace, and in working in a hotel or being in a restaurant, or anything to do with hospitality, any part of the industry. And it is a people industry after all, right? We're having personal connections. So it's building those personal connections on a daily basis when we show up at work, and you know, leveraging those so how we can show up as our best version of ourselves. And when you ask people for help, you know, people are going to absolutely want to help you the best way they can.
I'll add a few more resources. I mean, so you'll get the webinar after. The references I've included are some of my favorites, both in terms of it's really good research, but they bridge it to reality. So Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. Erminia Ibarra has done really interesting research. She's a professor at London Business School. She's written articles and books. Rob Cross has written really interesting things thinking about how networks work in our organization. So take a look at some of those references, and you can explore that as well, not purely for hospitality, but how do we build relationships that help our professional development.
And if I may add, if you're at one of these, if you're EHL or any of the hospitality schools, you know, ask your lecturers what sort of, you know, material they recommend. TED Talks, you know, Simon Sinek. You can adapt different types of material, you know, YouTube on any sort of topics, and it's incredible how much material there is. You can just adapt to the hospitality industry. You know, hospitality is a business skill. So anything around business, and the references that Janet mentioned that were in the presentation today are great places to start, or YouTube, TED Talks. And those leadership principles can be put into place in hospitality management.
Fabulous. And I have one last question because we need to wrap up soon. How can we not seem so robotic with all these standards and rules to respect to seem more natural and authentic? Maybe it would be nice if both of you could give us some opening lines that you use when you meet people at events or to break the ice when you meet someone new at a place that you, like how you said, it doesn't have to be a formal cocktail or a fancy networking event, but how do you just approach someone? What do you use? Maybe that will be nice for the participants to take away today.
I have one that I'm now going to take from another famous networking expert that I've heard. Her name is Heidi Roizen. She has a famous Harvard Business School case. She has a great opening line. She's also an introvert. She said, I go up to somebody and say, I really like your shoes. I really like something unique about you. And so she says, by definition, then you've put me, it's about me. It's something unique. We can start a conversation. And once the conversation gets started, it goes from there. So I found that a really creative way to get the conversation started with something that's not, hi, I'm Janet. What do you do? And why are you here today?
I like that. So genuine compliments, and that will take
Yeah.
you a bit. Okay.
And the other thing is, if you're going to an event, you see someone's name badge, or you find out about them. It's about asking the other person about themselves. It's about asking about where they live, what their family is, what are their passions, why they're at the event. After this sort of webinar, you can become much more intentional, right? And this can be transformational as you go to an event and look at the guest list. Maybe come up with maybe an elevator pitch. If there's somebody you want to meet and you looked up to, you just say, I saw you on the guest list, and then you can really identify an elevator pitch sort of introduction. This is who I am, and I've always wanted to meet you, and I've always looked up to you and respected you. It's not about necessarily being a taker. It's about giving and asking questions. When you ask somebody about themselves, showing genuine interest, care, and showing an interest in them will create a good relationship as an icebreaker. Okay,
thank you so much to both of you. So I will have to wrap up, and I just wanted to let the participants know today that all EHL's programs focus on networking, and their alumni network spans 25,000 members across 5 continents and 150 countries. They host over 300 events and gatherings a year. So if you've opted in to receive communications from us when signing up for this webinar, you'll receive more information about their programs soon. And I would like to thank you all for joining in today, and especially Janet and Jose for facilitating this wonderful session. If you've missed out on the webinar or partially missed out, or you want to watch a replay, the recording will be with you next week. Thank you so much for attending, and be in touch for our next webinar by just following our LinkedIn page. Thank you, and have a lovely evening.
Yeah,
thanks everyone. Thanks, Janet. Thank you, Raksha. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, EHL. It's been great to be here today. Thank you.
Likewise.
Good luck for the future with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.